So I've got 6 p.m. on Monday, May 17th. I will call to order this meeting of the Winooski City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So first up is agenda review. Any questions, concerns about the order of the agenda tonight? All right. Next is public comments. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak if they want to address a topic that is not covered in tonight's agenda. If you are here for an item on the agenda, please wait till we reach that. So if there's anyone who wishes to make public comment about an item not included here, now would be the time, and you could use the chat or the raise hand feature to let us know. All right, seeing no public comment, I'll move to our consent agenda. We have the liquor control and city council minutes from May 3rd, the payroll warrant of May 13th, and for the period of April 18th to May 1. PAC appointments and a keeping of chickens, PAC, Planning Advisory Committee, sorry, and a keeping of chickens application. Are there any questions or concerns about the consent agenda tonight? So hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. So we are at council reports. Mike, can I start with you tonight?
Sure. I have nothing to report tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hal, let's move to you.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to report that last week the Senate approved our charter change. So it's now through the General Assembly process. Now it goes to the governor's desk. So we anticipate it'll be signed and we can move forward with our charter changes. I attended the Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission meeting on May 11th. There was some discussion. It was actually, I think, a meeting for some of the new commissioners for their first time. And they were talking about the need for filling in a secretary position. So they'll figure that out, I think, by next meeting. The police department reported that they have an opportunity to hire 3 officers of color. And Chief Hebert is very excited about this opportunity so that our law enforcement staff begins to best reflect the makeup of our community. Chief Audi also reported that he has new recruits lined up for the fire department to be hired and trained in the next few months. The pool has had some winterization challenges, and the contractor, I believe, is on site to resolve these issues. The hope is that everything will go according to schedule, as has been planned. The creamy vendor has been contracted, as we know. I think we learned that last meeting. What else? And we had a presentation from the Winooski Partnership for Prevention. It was a very informed presentation about, how do we make sure we're doing our best work to make sure our young people are safe from drugs and alcohol and all those influences. So it was a good meeting, and I look forward to further liaisons. Thank you.
Thanks, Hal.
Yep.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Bryn?
Hi, thank you. Good evening. I don't have much to report on. Some of the agenda items tonight will be covering alternate candidates for Chittenden Solid Waste District, Board of Commissioners. We had 2 interviews last week, and the panelists have selected a candidate, so we'll talk about that soon. I attended the South Burlington Energy Committee meeting last Wednesday, just to sit in and see what their structure is, what their agenda and format is, and doing a little bit of research on energy committee meetings to explore some opportunities for incorporation into the infrastructure committee this next coming year. And I have a call set up with John Rauscher and the chair of the infrastructure committee meeting on Wednesday night. So that committee has not, that commission has not met yet. So nothing to report on that at this time. And that's it for me.
Thank you. So last Friday, we wished a fond farewell to City Manager Jesse Baker and would like to just call out for the public that we now have our Public Works Director, John Rauscher, and our HR Manager, Phoebe Townsend, filling in as co-managers for the interim while we are in our hiring process. For council's reference, they're going to sort of split city updates based on the roles that they're overseeing, and we'll have their various agenda items to them. So essentially, they'll both be here for every council meeting and supporting us. The search committee, the city manager hiring search committee, is currently working on interview questions to ask candidates. So we are moving along in that process as expected. We are putting together a bank of questions so that interviews have parity, and each candidate has the opportunity to respond to the same prompts. And the last meeting had some really robust discussion about gleaning from candidates why they specifically want this role in Winooski. So it was really good. We are meeting again on Monday at 5:30 p.m., advertising that meeting just like all the rest on the city's updates, Front Porch Forum, Facebook, everything like that. Since our last meeting, the Finance Commission continued to work through some of the financial policies, including internal controls and risk management. And we will start seeing, we have some of those on the agenda tonight, so we will start seeing what they have been improving over the last couple months. The Planning Commission also continued with form-based code review, and they reached the section about the bonus story incentive in our form-based code that aims to incentivize developers to build middle-income affordable housing and or meet certain energy standards. So 2 years ago at our priority and strategy session, we charged that commission with coming back to us with recommendations to change that incentive because it's not working. Developers aren't accessing it. So it's not, we either need a different incentive to offer for those two pieces that we're trying to incentivize, or we also might consider what it is that we're incentivizing if those are still the right topics. So for the energy efficiency standards, we're finding most development is meeting those anyway. So maybe we want to look at something else. So I think this is something we will likely take up in the priority and strategy session or coming out of that, so we can give some guidance back to our commissions. Last thing, I was invited to a ribbon cutting for the Vermont Patriots Soccer Club's first home game in Winooski at Landry Park. That's an organization that the city has been partnering with to offer high quality soccer program at low or no cost to Winooski residents. And I guess this is the first time that they've played a game here since they started working in Winooski. So it's very exciting. With that, I'm going to turn it to Phoebe first for city updates.
Thank you, Mayor. So bear with me, I have a number of updates. So the first update is around our COVID situation in Winooski. So for the most recently reported week, we saw 6 new cases, and we've seen a steady weekly decline in the number of positive cases reported in Winooski, so that's great. In the coming week, we hope to receive community level data around vaccination rates, and we'll begin to assess ways to address any gaps in vaccination that we identify. And also Vermonters from ages 12 to 15 are now eligible to get the vaccine. So if residents need assistance with registering to get a COVID vaccine, they can call the library at 802-655-6424 for support. And on Friday, the 14th, the governor announced that because Vermont has already hit its necessary vaccination threshold, with over 60% of the population receiving a first dose, it will move into step 3 of the Vermont Forward Plan. So that's about 2 weeks ahead of the anticipated schedule. And there are also a number of changes to the masking mandate, along with that new executive order. And people can go to the Vermont Department of Health website for more information there. So I do have an update on the City of Winooski Municipal Services Public Access Plan, as well as our safety plan in general. So we are going to be generally taking a phased approach to public access to city buildings and returning to full service hours over the next 6 weeks. So a news update did go out about this today with a lot of detail in it. So anyone can reach out to us directly with any questions, but essentially we'll be still requiring masks and 6-foot social distancing inside any city-owned building until further notice. So we do have a phased access plan until June 1st, and then we're expanding some hours for various buildings starting June 1st, and then we're hoping to have all of our buildings and services, we're hoping to have all of our buildings and services fully open by July 6th. So as I said, more details are available in the news update, but essentially we are opening City Hall from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. until June 1st. The library is still open for curbside pickup Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturday from 10 to 2. We can still do browse and borrow sessions. You can make those appointments online. And the Senior Center and the O'Brien Community Center are still closed to the public, but for by appointment. Parking is being enforced downtown, and we're still encouraging people to use the Park mobile app as much as possible. All utility disconnections are canceled for the quarter. Code enforcement, residential and commercial inspections. We have reinstated inspections with safety procedures in place, and we can still process housing complaints. And then zoning permits and building permits, we're still asking people to, the extent possible, to email those applications and supporting documents. So the Myers Memorial Pool is going to be open to the public on Sunday, June 6th, which is very exciting. We'll have initial capacity of 75 swimmers at a time. So that's going to be a combination of about 30% of pre-registered slots, and drop-in slots will be about 70%. So we have all of that information available at winooskibt.gov/pool. And pool passes are still for sale, and we've got scholarship and payment plans available for all season passes. So we are excited about that, and we encourage everyone to get their passes as soon as possible. And that will, the pool capacity will increase to 100 swimmers at a time starting on July 6th. And on July 6th, we will return to City Hall being open to the public from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And full opening hours for both community services at the community center and the library and senior center. So keep an eye out for more of those updates, and please reach out to us if you have any questions. COVID testing is still happening at the O'Brien Community Center, and any of those times can be registered for at vermont.force.com. And there are also walk-ups available, and that's happening for the remainder of the month on Mondays from 2 to 8 p.m., Tuesdays from 9 to 3 p.m., Wednesdays from 2 to 8 p.m., Thursdays from 9 to 3 p.m., Fridays from 2 to 8 p.m., Saturdays from 9 to 3 p.m., and Sundays from 9 to 3 p.m. So they will continue free public testing in June, and the schedule and details for that may change. So we will keep updating the community on that. And we have a testing tab on our COVID-19 page at winooskibt.gov/COVID-19. So that is all of our COVID and safety updates. I just have a couple of other updates. North End Studios, the remainder of North End Studios property is in the process of being removed from the community center this week. We have an update on our Working Communities Challenge grant. We had a full team meeting last week, and we also had 4 members of the team attend an adaptive leadership training, which was really informative. Yasmin Gordon is our new equity director, who will be introduced later in this meeting, and she is taking over as the primary point person for the grant. So she's working on scheduling a next full team meeting for July. And then we have the American Rescue Plan Act funding. The staff continues to get more information about how municipalities can use these funds. And as we get that information, we're just continuing to analyze how we can put those funds to best use. So the deadline for earmarking the funds is 2024. So we still have some time to fully evaluate all of our options. And those are all my updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. John, take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So I just have 3 quick updates from my end. 2 are construction related. So first one is the VTrans circulator roadway update. So some of you have probably seen last week, VTrans sent out an update that work is expected to start this Friday, the 21st. That work is anticipated to start in the evening. So they're working from 7 p.m. till 6 a.m. However, that work may start Monday, and they're going to confirm that on their next update, which will be this Thursday. So we'll be sure to share that through all our city channels as well. The other construction update is for the 355 Main Street project. So that's the development project that's on the corner of Bellevue and Main Street on the north end of the corridor, across from Juniors and Fodang. So they have some utility work they have to do in Main Street this week, tying in their water service. So there's going to be a temporary detour and some flagging this Wednesday. They're proposing to do that work. So drivers on the corridor may see some disruption there. So they're expected to do that work Wednesdays starting at 9 a.m. just outside that sort of AM high traffic area, and be done before the PM commute time, so around 3 p.m. And then final update. So kudos to Heather for another grant award. So this is the Women's Fund Grant Award that we recently received. So this is a $9,000 grant to foster the participation of women and girls in municipal decision making. And this is aligned with the City's Working Communities Challenge Equity Initiative. So great job to Heather for getting this grant. Also want to give credit to the mayor for identifying the programming and looking for some outside funding source. So thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you, John. And way to go, Heather. We will move on to the regular items of our agenda. So first up is the Chittenden Solid Waste District FY22 budget. And we have a CSDW guest with us, Sarah Reeves, right?
Yeah, CSWD. Michelle Morris is also with CSWD, and if you can pull her over, that would be great too. Thank you.
Great. Welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate your time. And I am pleased to be here tonight to present the fiscal 22 CSWD budget. My name is Sarah Reeves. I am the Executive Director for the Chittenden Solid Waste District. And for those who may be tuning in who aren't familiar with CSWD, we are a municipal district, a municipality created in 1987 to oversee and manage solid waste generated in Chittenden County. We are governed by a volunteer board of commissioners, and each of our 18 cities and towns appoints a representative to the board. The mission of the Chittenden Solid Waste District is to reduce and manage the waste generated in Chittenden County in an environmentally sound, efficient, effective, and economical manner. And because I'm here to talk about the budget, I always like to remind folks of how we are funded and how we are not funded. the main way that we are funded are three main ways. We have user fees, which are essentially tipping fees or fees that we charge on materials coming into our facilities, like our drop-off centers or the materials recovery facility or compost facility. We have a solid waste management fee, which is a per ton fee that we charge haulers on every ton of trash that is brought to the landfill in Coventry. And then the other main third of our revenue is from material or product sales. So things like our compost products, our topsoil garden mix, and the sale of recyclables and local colored paint. Where we are not funded is we are not funded through municipal tax dollars. We do not assess any per capita fees to our member communities. We don't receive any income tax, property tax dollars, sales tax, nothing directly from the municipalities. All of our revenue is generated by those three main areas that I described just previously. So for this year, fiscal 22, we are anticipating revenues in the amount of $12,954,793. And we are expecting that estimate actually to be a bit conservative, and I'll explain why in a moment. We are also anticipating expenditures in the amount of $12,323,072, with the remaining $860-ish being divided amongst three main reserve funds: our solid waste management fee reserve fund, our biosolids reserve fund, and an operating reserve. So one of the items that I mentioned why we're anticipating that the revenues will most likely be conservative is we are expecting a very robust year for material sales, both from our compost facility and from the materials recovery facility. And in previous years, I've come and talked to you about kind of the dire straits of the recycling fees in the recycling world. And one of the results of COVID was that flipped on its head. So about 80% of what we process through the MRF are paper products and cardboard products. And due to COVID, a lot of people obviously were working from home, buying things online. So that spiked a great demand in cardboard. And also things like toilet paper, paper towels, wipes are made in large part from recycled paper. So those two demands were really helped to spur the revenues last year for the MRF. That demand is continuing this year as well. So we are expecting another strong revenue year there. Similarly, we had a huge sales year last year for compost products as people were staying home. We're either creating gardens, expanding gardens, growing their own food. We're seeing similar sales results this year and are expecting similar sales results in fiscal 22. So both of those programs will lead us, we believe, to a very robust revenue year, which is good news. That means that we don't have to raise the majority of our fees. In fact, the fees that only fees that we are raising this year is at our organics diversion facility at Green Mountain Compost, raising that incoming material fee from $60 a ton to $65 a ton. That'll be effective July 1. And some small increases on the biosolids fees, and that is strictly related to the amount of material being managed. Those fees are passed through. So as more material is generated, higher fees occur. So those are the only two fees that are being raised this year. We are not raising fees at our drop-off centers. We are not raising the fee at the materials recovery facility, nor are we raising the fees, the solid waste management fee. We are anticipating a very heavy capital infrastructure investment year. Despite COVID, we continue with our investments at the compost facility last year. That was phase 1. That is complete. We are entering into phase 2. The reason that work at compost is so important was because we knew, obviously, last July, the last part of Act 148, which requires all food scraps to be kept out of the landfill, was going to be kicking in. So we were anticipating that need, and we're building out that site. We are continuing to build out that site this year. We are also looking at making some infrastructure improvements to a couple of our drop-off centers, to Milton and to Richmond. And we're also beginning the process for design and permitting of a new materials recovery facility. And I have talked with you in the past couple of years of the need for a new materials recovery facility. We are one of two located in Vermont, and our facility is 30 years old, 30 plus, and it is still an all manual facility. We really need to come into the 21st century. And so we have been researching this for the past couple of years, 3 years, and now is the time we are ready to bring this to our Board of Commissioners in the next month or two to get their final approval and sign off on this project. If they do give approval, this is one project that we don't have the cash in the bank for. So we would anticipate coming to our member communities for a municipal bond. You have a very brief project overview in your packet. Should our board approve this project, we will be coming to you with much more information about that project. We will be bringing the bond in November of 2022. We are anticipating it to be about $18 to $20 million. As with any municipal bonds like this, we are not asking you to pay for this project. We simply need the approval of our voters in order to borrow this money to go out to bond. The bond payments would be paid through a series of revenue sources, mainly through the user fees or the tip fees generated at the materials recovery facility. If for some reason those tip fees aren't generating enough revenue, we would supplement that with the material revenue from the sale of the materials. If for some reason that isn't enough, it would be supplemented by the solid waste management fee revenue. So we have 3 streams of revenue that would pay for that bond payment. So we would not be coming to our municipalities looking for that payment. And one of the questions I've been getting at some of the presentations I've done is then asking about the rover. So that is one program that, again, due to COVID, we did suspend for last year, went to an appointment-only system at the environmental depot. That system is still in place. We are looking at bringing a modified version of rover events back in the fall. I don't have the exact dates yet, but they would only be a few, maybe a handful, 6 or so. Seeing how the participation is with the rover events there, evaluating over the winter, and then looking again at the spring. But you don't have to wait for a rover. The environmental depot is open throughout the week. It's very easy to make an appointment. It's actually very, very fast. When you get there, you get there your time and you're in and out and you're done. So I do encourage you to look at that. But for folks who love the rover, it may be coming back in limited fashion in the fall. So I know I've put a lot of information, very brief overview, and I would love to open it up for any questions that you may have on our budget.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And for anyone who is unaware, Bryn Oakleaf has been serving as our representative to the board for some years now for Winooski. So Bryn, if there's anything you want to add about the process that you all went through to get to this budget.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So CSWD has a standing finance committee. The board chair sits on that committee, as well as there's 3 appointed finance committee commissioners that participate on that. And they meet throughout the year, relatively monthly, but not always, depending on items on the agenda. It goes through extensive, similar to the council, it goes through a kind of condensed and extensive meeting periods beginning in January, and this year not wrapping up until just early April. Once that moves through the finance committee, that comes to the executive committee, there's further review there. And then if it's approved at the executive board level, then it moves to the full board. And this year, the full board did approve unanimously the budget. I have complete confidence. There was a great deal of effort by Sarah and the team to ensure that any additional expenses were maintained at a minimum, and that any fees were also mitigated as much as possible. So I have a great deal of confidence in this budget and in the fiscal year coming ahead. The only other element that I would want to mention or have Sarah touch on is access to America Rescue Plan Act funds as it relates to capital projects. while it is wonderful that we won't, the district will not be coming to the towns for any funding, I think it is relevant to the counselors how additional capital funds may be allocated or advocated for. So, Sarah, if you just want to touch on that briefly.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. We did talk to our delegation, the federal delegation, about accessing ARPA, and they acknowledged that that was a miss, a bit of an oversight, because Vermont doesn't have county government. We actually don't have access to ARPA funds. Everything went down to the cities and towns, as you know. We are going forward with applying for the separate earmark programs. So we are working with both of our senators on those applications, and we plan to have Senator Leahy's application in preliminary application in this week. And we were looking at getting Senator Sanders' preliminary application in either this week or next week. So we will be focusing on those avenues for potential federal dollars. There are also other potential avenues for funding. So even if we, do not have access to congressionally directed funding at that level for the full project, if there's partial funding, we would take it. There's also other private funding that we would have access to as municipality specifically for recycling infrastructure. We would be pursuing that as well. So the goal truly is to have, if we need a bond, to have it be as small as possible that we bring to our municipalities. So we are shaking every tree we can. Thank you for bringing that up, Bren.
Well, thank you for the overview. Having seen your last several annual budgets, and as you mentioned before, this was a pleasant surprise to see what was in here with what we've heard in the past regarding the recycling and the cost of that. So are there questions from council about the proposed budget for CSWD? Sarah, you're too thorough. Are there any questions from members of the public? Again, you can use the chat or raise hand feature. All right, hearing no questions or concerns, this is on for approval tonight. As member municipality, we must approve, we must take a vote to approve this budget. So would someone like to move to approve the Chittenden Solid Waste District FY22 budget as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
So moving to item B, related, while Bryn is serving as our rep to the CSWD board, we haven't had an alternate. That role hasn't been filled in some time. And so Bryn, CSWD folks, city staff interviewed 2 applicants for the position, and tonight bring forth a recommendation for Ron Stoughton to fill the position, who has previously served on other commissions for us. And the application materials are included in the packet. Are there any questions from council about this recommendation? Any questions from members of the public? All right, do I have a motion to approve the CSWD alternate appointment?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries, thank you. All right, so item C, moving on. This is a resolution on the noise insulation program. So, we have been collaborating with the Burlington Airport as they work with an FAA consultant on this noise mitigation program to support residents who are in the 65 day-night decibel zone to get some insulation and treatment for their homes to reduce indoor noise from aircraft. So I reached out to several other municipal leaders in the Northeast who have a noise mitigation program in place already, and asked for some tips, like what would you look out for? What would you want to make sure you see? So this resolution includes basically a direct ask to the airport and the FAA that as they roll out this program, we include certain acoustic windows and doors, one to be just a high quality product that will last long term for folks with the noise, but also can help with energy efficiency goals in people's homes. And then the second request is about just ensuring that communication on the program is very robust. And so the consultant who carries out this work, that they are reaching out to folks and making sure the necessary information is made available to all residents who are able to access this program. We do have Aviation Director Jean Richards here, and Nick, I'm afraid I do not know your title offhand.
Officially, it's the Deputy Director.
Deputy Director, thank you. Nick Longo here from the airport. We also have the following item on the agenda for tonight is about an easement for a noise monitoring system. So they will be giving us an update on the noise program and the noise monitoring. But I wanted to first just introduce this resolution. If there are questions on that, or we can ask them to provide us an update before we consider the resolution. I feel like the latter might make more sense now that I've said it out loud. So Jean or Nick, if whoever would like to go, we would love to hear what the status is on the implementation of the noise program, as well as the noise monitoring system, which you had received through a separate FAA grant.
Great. First of all, I'd like to thank you for asking us to be here tonight. And it's always good to be in front of you and to communicate and give you updates. This program is progressing, and it's progressing in a favorable way, I believe, because of the collaboration, between the communities and the airport. So thank you for the time you put in, not only with us, with the Guard and anybody else. I think it's been a real interesting process. So some things I'd like to hit on tonight, if you're comfortable with it, is sound mitigation, sound monitoring, and the DoD process that we've been dealing with. It all intermingles, and I guess I'm going to let Nick give the high overview on the whole program, but what I've experienced with just about all of our grants, that we deal with, they tell you that it is this way and this is what you do, and what I know we have to do is we have to stick together, and we have to ask for what it is that we want. And I have had some conversations with our consultant about the type of windows that we're putting in, and potentially, and she's having a difficult time finding national vendors, and I have a problem with that too. National vendors, I want to be using local. So I really think that if something happens to a window, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, Mayor, but I just want to let you know it's we need to tailor this to the program that we want, and not necessarily accept the answer that is given. So anyhow, they're all progressing nicely. I'll let Nick give you some dates and times, and that they're coming. It sounds like this summer things will be working in DoD. Those funds, as you heard, when we spoke to them, that it's not. There's no guarantee right now about anything. It's very in flux, and what I'm finding is that I have to talk to Senator Leahy's office often about it, as well as let them know how important it is. Nick came up with an amazing way to use the DoD funds, and so that we could maximize the money that is out there. And I'd like to he can go over that a little bit with you, but why don't we just start off with noise mitigation, then go to sound monitoring, and then go to DOD on the way out. I'll let Nick give his version, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. And one thing I want to ensure is if I don't want to be interpreted as telling you anything. Many of what we've talked about, and that's how we've gotten to where we are. We want the program that works best for the community, not, it's not an airport program. We're not putting down runways. This is really what the community has asked for, and we're delivering that. So if that is not what you're wanting, or if it's tweaked, it needs to be tweaked, just let us know that, and we'll advocate for that tweak as much as we can.
Dean, that's a great point for context here, and why this resolution has been drafted. It's a way for us to say what we want to see in this program. That's a little bit maybe beyond what the FAA normally would do, but still within the realm of what you can do in a noise compatibility program.
And Mayor, as we always do, as it progresses and things get picked out, I would like to work, Nick and I would like to work with you all very closely and keep the communications very high to make sure that someone doesn't give us what they think we want. I do agree with you. We have to tell them what we want if we want something different than what we think they're going to give us.
Thanks. So, sorry.
I'll let Nick go ahead now. Sorry, I'm just babbling here. Nick, why don't you go sound mitigation first?
Perfect. Yeah. Again, my name is Nick Longo. I'm the deputy director at the airport. Thank you, Mayor, councilors, everybody really for having us. Mayor, please stop me if I'm going too much. I figured I'd start really high level at kind of giving a little bit of the background of how we got to where we are today, and some of the procedural items, and then dive right into where we are today, and then what the next steps are as far as schedule goes, and some updates related to this resolution that you have on the agenda tonight, both the easement and the this current resolution. So I think it's important to note that this is a very complex program, both administered by the Federal Aviation Administration, and how we started was through a noise exposure map, which I believe you all have seen and is online at btvsound.com for those listening. That noise exposure map is then identified in an implementation or a noise compatibility program. That program is exactly what the mayor and Jean have been speaking about right now, which identifies solutions to mitigating the noise within that exposure map. One of those solutions, of course, is sound insulation. We have moved very swiftly into another document that the FAA requires, which is called the implementation plan. That plan is drafted and has been reviewed by the communities. We are just about completed on a final version of that draft, which we will share with you prior to posting it on our website. The FAA is just reviewing a couple of things as well as ourselves. So that should be completed very shortly. We're hoping by mid-June to be 100% completed with that, which does incorporate the latest documentation and data from each one of the communities impacted, including Williston, South Burlington, Burlington, and Winooski, of course. So that data came from, I think Eric provided a lot of that through our consultants, and again, will be submitted to you for comments and publication. Another item that was part of our noise compatibility program was the noise monitoring system. This system is moving forward quickly, and we'd like to go live with it, if you will, by the end of July or this summer. That noise monitoring is exactly that. It is a microphone and is related to your next agenda item, and I can speak to it further on that agenda item as well. But essentially, a microphone and associated with aircraft noise through radar data, so that they are very much connected, so that any member of the public can go onto an online platform, see the actual decibel levels from that single event, and associate it with radar information from the Federal Aviation Administration. So that part of the NCP process is almost completed. It is fully funded through the FAA right now, and that's why we are moving forward with it this year. The noise compatibility program, one of the large items, of course, is the noise mitigation, referencing the addition of new windows, new doors, essentially reducing the interior noise levels of eligible properties. Eligible properties meaning mostly residential properties, but there are other properties that could be potentially eligible as well, such as educational facilities, daycare facilities, worship facilities as well. So that is being moved forward. We applied for our first grant as part of this noise compatibility program just recently, just in the past couple of months. We refer to that as our pilot program that incorporates 10 houses into this first round of noise insulation. The reason that only 10 houses are incorporated in this is we need to perform a required acoustical testing plan. If you recall, we performed our first acoustical testing plan at a South Burlington educational elementary school, the Chamberlain Elementary School in the city of South Burlington. And that identifies what the interior noise level is and outlines what we need to accomplish to reduce the interior noise levels of whatever particular building that we are studying. That pilot program, again, those 10 houses are going to be a mixture of houses throughout the multiple communities. That is a percentage, essentially, as the years go on, a percentage of houses from each community. 10 houses in this pilot program, so there'll be a few in Winooski, a few in South Burlington, and Williston. That will incorporate acoustical testing, as I just mentioned, and then some other planning associated documentation required by the FAA, such as historical preservation documentation, outreach. There are some agreements that we are required to have with each one of the property owners. We'd also need to work with each one of the communities, such as yourselves, on any code issues that should be resolved as we continue the design process, and then some other minor federal requirements and design criteria. So those 10 houses, this pilot program is ongoing right now. We authorized our consultant firm, the Jones Payne Group, to move forward swiftly, even before we get the grant in hand. Again, we applied for the grant. We do not yet have the grant in hand. But they're going to be moving forward. They're going to be studying and incorporating additional data that we gained from the Vermont gas systems. If you recall, we also have a partnership with them, VGS, to help fund a portion or the local share of some of these projects, not only this year, but in future years as well. The pilot program, we were lucky enough to, and we're still in negotiation with the FAA regarding some of the funding. The pilot program incorporates 10 houses, not only outreach, planning efforts, design efforts, but also construction. So we're going to be able to take these 10 houses from A to Z, installing these windows and doors for these 10 houses as soon as possible. This grant that we applied for, the same grant, also incorporates the next 50 houses within the program so that we can move and rotate into the next 50 houses of designs immediately so that we can, again, prepare for the construction efforts associated with the 50 houses. And if you think of this as a rotating basis, every year, essentially, we're going to be designing 50 houses and constructing 50 houses as we design for the next year's 50 houses so that we can apply for a construction grant the following year for the design work that we did the prior year. So always rotating between 50 houses design and construction. This really does set us up for the next point, which is this Department of Defense or additional appropriation that is potentially coming this year as far as planning efforts go and into next year with a substantial amount of federal funding, DoD funding, to really grow the size of houses that we design and outreach efforts are incorporated into. There was a collaborative letter, as I'm sure you are aware of, between the city of Winooski, South Burlington, and the airport that requested $50 million to be put into this program immediately. We are one of, and from as far as I am aware, and I've been doing this for approximately 9 years now at the Burlington Airport, or 8 years rather, at the Burlington Airport, we are very much in front of the line, not only for priority of federal funding, but also ahead of the schedule for the required documentation that I just referenced, as far as the noise compatibility program, implementation plan, noise exposure map. All of these items are lined up for us to be in a really good position to apply for this DoD funding, advocate for this DoD funding, which was appropriated nationwide at $50 million. And again, that is what we asked for collaboratively to move very, very swiftly into implementing all of these programs into the insulation or new windows and doors immediately.
And Nick, just let them know that, from our conversations, and Mayor Lott has been involved in these as well, is there is no program. And so this money, that we're requesting, there's no formulas, there's no program. They're trying to figure out even how to spend it. Well, DoD doesn't ever give municipalities money from what they tell us. And, the discussions we've have been, a little frustrating for me. And I was very thankful for Nick's suggestion on how to use the 50 million and how to use it in our area. So we are being diligent. We don't control, the potential outcome. And I believe that the effort that has been put in today is pushed it ahead. Certainly when we first talked, they did anticipate having any money available for at least 2 years or longer, with a cap basically on the funds need to be spent within 5 years. So, Nick came up with some very good suggestions and ways to do it, and it would best work for our current program. So I just want to make sure that I put that bit of caution in there. The money has been allocated. There is no program. So what they're doing now is creating a program, and Nick has given them a venue on how to best deal with communities like ours and best ways that they can be helpful. The last thing we need is someone coming and talking to us. We actually need tools to fix the issues. So that's what we've asked for. I think we've been pretty straight up, and I think Mayor Lott can back that up, I believe. We've had very frank conversations with them. Does that sound right, Nick and Mayor Lott?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, if I could layer in, I think I gave a brief update during council reports quite a few weeks ago on this. Senator Leahy's office let us know about this potential appropriation from the Department of Defense that could be used to assist municipalities with technical assistance. So it can't be used. My understanding is it's not money that we could use to expand construction, for example, and insulation efforts. So the conversations have been about, is there technical guidance that it could offer, that it could cover, or could it cover, the initial like communications rollout and program structuring that will support how folks access the noise and home insulation. And it is not guaranteed funding by any means. So there have been ongoing discussions with staff from the 3 municipalities included about how to potentially leverage this. So it would offset, if it could be used for like the program structuring and outreach work, then that's money that's FAA money not being used there, FAA money that can go directly into houses. This might be, Nick, unless you had some more high level things about the noise mitigation program, it could be a good stopping point to see if counselors have questions.
Perfect. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say one more thing, Mayor?
Sure.
What I'll ask you to do is, as we go through this process, is whether you like what we're saying or you don't like what we're saying, is that you stay engaged, everybody. One thing in particular, what I noticed about, your wonderful community is its historical value. And so as we start talking about replacement windows and doors, that we're, I've had a couple of discussions with the consultant about this, and, we had some pretty aggressive words. And I think I said it's very important that we put a high quality product and one that resembles the product that is there in visual, but obviously is a better window. So historically correct, I think, is really important that, that we do not miss this opportunity to, if there are windows that are 6/6 or something like this, is that we push for that. And that we, I brought up, Marvin Windows, they do a wonderful job, recreating, the historical nature of a window. And the program, I guess, typically uses plastic windows. What I'm concerned about a window like this is its hardware and its longevity. So I just asked, I don't want to be alone on this. I've worked on a lot of homes in my life, and the worst thing you can do is put in a window that is perceived to be better than 10 years later. It doesn't hold up for reasons. And that's another reason why we will want to use somebody local. So if we have a problem, we can talk to somebody local and they can repair the issue. So, I just ask, just join me if you believe in that direction, and, and putting attention to detail on the product that is put in. It's not just putting product in, putting good product in. And I have emphasized that and got a little pushback. And it wasn't that they're going to put in bad product. They're going to put in product that, fits the program. But what I know and what I've said before is we have to be diligent on what fits our community, not necessarily the program. And what I've been told is that's going to make the program very expensive. And I says, I want to do it correctly. So, those are some of my conversations, and very informal. But I just ask you, if you could keep an eye on those things as we progress and hold the program, to the level that fits your community. I think that's very important.
Thanks, Jean. So counselors, questions on the noise mitigation program, where we're at with that, next steps, this resolution? Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Jean, I agree 100% with you about local vendors and local contractors. It makes sense. It's a no-brainer. We want to keep everything we can here in Vermont. And like you said, if a problem arises, it'll be a lot easier to deal with someone locally than have to wait to go down the chain on phone calls and Zoom meetings on national chains. I also agree with you about the product that we should be aiming for. We can all put something in to fix the problem at a short term, but what's going to do, 10 years, 20 years from now? And I like the fact that you have said that, and that's on your radar.
Thank you. And I did ask, by the way, I've asked for a demo to be put up in our baggage area, a 30 by 20 room with all these different windows that they're proposing, so that we can, all of us, look at them and learn about them and make sure they are right for our communities.
Are there other questions from council?
I have a couple questions. So in terms of the eligible homes, I'm curious, will multifamily homes be included in that eligibility?
They are.
That's correct. Yep.
So there's not a unit max or a story max on that?
No. So the general guidelines for eligibility are if you are within that 65 DNL or that average decibel line, you're generally eligible for for those windows and doors. The acoustical test will confirm that eligibility by identifying what that interior noise level is. But multifamily, all of that is incorporated in that potential eligibility.
And then just in terms of the project, like where you are with the project, so you have these 10 homes across the municipalities, the impacted municipalities. There'll be 2 in Winooski, 3 in Winooski?
Probably 2 houses in Winooski for this specific pilot program, for this year's pilot, correct.
And how would, what's the plan for selecting those?
So it's a combination of Vermont Gas Systems has quite a bit of data that we can incorporate already by while the federal intention, the federal aviation intention isn't to lower efficiencies within the property. All of that information is highly connected. So we can incorporate and utilize their information to identify the houses that they've already been in and already worked with some of these homeowners, so that we can also identify higher priority houses to involve in the initial phasing of this project. The next criteria really is related to where they are geographically within the contour lines. Again, it's going to be a split among the communities. So within Winooski, whatever the percentages of houses for that particular year, it will be referencing the higher decibel averages within that particular town.
Okay. I do have a couple more questions, if that's okay. I am curious with the pilot 10 and then, another anticipated 50, will the airport be managing an RFP for contractors? Will that be Vermont Gas? Will that be the FAA?
It'll be the consultant. The consultant will be doing that. Okay. Jones.
Just knowing the demand for a number of projects on the horizon with the ARPA funds, as well as some additional ordinances that are coming through our neighboring municipalities. Just looking at weatherization contractors and the demand for that. So wanting to ensure the timeline of availability to complete the work blends well with the timing for FAA requirements to have funds expended.
And I think if we run into a problem, we will certainly request it. I mean, it hasn't ever been this bad in Chittenden County since 1980, as long as I've been here, as far as trying to get somebody to do something. I mean, and that's every trade that you're speaking about. So it's, I think we're going to have to be creative. And we might need to talk to each one of our CEDO departments and see if we can create some businesses. I think there's a lot of opportunities here. But again, we want to be done by skilled professionals so that we have no callbacks. So I can't say that's not going to happen, because I know it is going to happen if it continues at the rate that it is right now, as far as trying to get subs to do things.
Thanks, Gene. Just one final question. I wasn't quite following along, and it may be that I missed some of the prior communications, but Nick, you were mentioning design and construction. So I'm not sure how the design and construction work that you were talking about, how that relates to the insulation project work.
So the design portion, or let's call it the planning and the design portion of this, of each phase or each year of the project would really incorporate everything from outreach to the required documentation, as I referenced, as well as the design of windows and the doors associated with the product necessary, as well as each unique property that we need to design it for, whether that's historical in nature or just unique circumstances related to that particular house or unit. The construction, I guess I don't quite understand the question, but the construction would immediately follow right after that with appropriate bids, et cetera, to go in and purchase the product and install the product. I don't know if I answered your question.
Okay, so I think it's a terminology issue. When you say design and construct, to me, it sounds like you're building homes. So that's a disconnect when I think of that's not what I would think that we're talking about with insulation, but I think that's just a terminology disconnect.
That we use, it's just design the program and then construct it, just implement it. It might be one that we use more often. So it would be create it and then implementation of it. And I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah, it really is just a terminology. That's exactly how the FAA identifies it within the grant. Is first we have a lump sum of design funding, and then we have a construction funding.
I see. Program. Yeah, that makes better sense now. And terminology between agencies doesn't always jive well
Transfer,
with what makes sense on the ground. So thank you. Those are the questions I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other councilors with questions? Mike?
One more quick one. So are we just talking windows and doors, or what about the installation? Is that not on this?
So part of the acoustical testing plan is going to identify those unique products that might be necessary to reduce the interior noise level. So as we do the acoustical testing plan, if the design of that acoustical testing plan spells out certain products that lead up to insulation, then that might be a product that unique property might be eligible for. Okay. Typically, windows and doors would accommodate or accomplish the work that the FAA requires to reduce interior noise levels. But again, if just windows and doors doesn't do it, then we move on to that next step of insulation, roofing, things like that could also accomplish the reduction in interior noise.
Perfect. Thank you.
The windows and doors are typically the items that people can't afford. And the insulation, if they choose to or need it still, may be something that's more affordable to them, or have one of the other programs that we offer in Chittenden County. But I think initially our first aspect of this is going to just be, will be windows and doors.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Gene and Nick, for being here to go through this. In looking at the resolution that we are considering today, I'm curious if you feel that all the requests around communications, notification, translation, multiple methods of dissemination, if those are achievable with the program you have, or do you need these DoD funds? So not with the program you have, but with the existing plan funds, or do you need these DoD funds to make that a reality? How achievable is it to have a robust engagement strategy that's going to work for our diverse city?
I think they're achievable. I think we have to bring it to the table and ask and request it. I don't want to shoot anything down. If it's a tool that's needed, in your community to have this program be successfur, I think we need to try to, present it and see if we can incorporate it. I don't want to start at this point. I would discourage you to do anything. I would like you to go full throttle and tell us what we need. We really want this, the whole purpose of this program is to be successful. And so whatever methods, whatever we have to do to incorporate it in the program, I would encourage you to give that to us, and we'll certainly communicate back to you if there's something we can't do. But right now, I would highly recommend just communicate. It's been very effective so far.
I'll just add a piece to that as well, if you don't mind.
Sure.
All three of those items in the resolution tonight, I forwarded off to our consultant, which is a very timely resolution because we are in the midst of funding conversation with the FAA right now. So exactly what Gene was talking about, not only the type of products being installed, the communication with the partnership as you outlined in the resolution, and the dissemination of the materials and information and eligibility requirements, et cetera, can all be incorporated within our consultant's scope of work appropriately and funded appropriately within this pilot program.
Does that answer your question, Jim? Or?
Yep, that does. Thank you.
So I think we could open it to public comment. Paul, as you bring over Dr. Ackland, I'm just going to lift up these questions he threw in the chat. So the first question was, how many of our houses, condo units, and apartments are in the impacted zone? What number of these spaces will be insulated each year? What percentage of the total does this represent? And how long would it take to insulate all homes? So we have approximately 1,300 housing units in Winooski that are included within the 65 DNL, 43% of our homes. The program so far, as I understand it, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, is targeting 50 homes a year spread across the 3 communities and a 26-year lifespan of this program. Is that still the estimate?
That's correct. And 50 houses, once after this particular year, 50 houses will be in the design process, and an additional 50 houses will be in the construction portion of the process. So every year we're constantly doing that rotation, and all that other information that you just stated is correct.
Thanks. And then something I want to make clear too is it's a it's a voluntary program, right? There may be folks that are included in those 1,300 households that don't choose to do this. And as I understand it as well, there could be folks who actually acoustically don't qualify because their interior noise level is low.
Exactly.
That's correct.
If you've recently renovated your house and you put new windows in and new doors, you may not qualify. And it's more about sound.
Yeah. So that's why there's some leeway in the numbers. Also, we will continue, Winooski, Burlington, and South Burlington seeking additional match funding. So if we could find 10%, we have the $5 million commitment right now from Vermont Gas. If we found another $5 million, had a $10 million match, we could attempt to get $90 million from the FAA, right, and expand the program. But there are a lot of constraints as well, to the point earlier about how much construction can feasibly occur at one time in our region. So,
as well, if I might add, Mayor, as well as some limitations on funding from the FAA as well. So they've in our capital plan have approved a $5 million a year FAA contribution.
And then there were 2 more questions from Dr. Eklund. Will the installation stop if Burlington stops writing grants for funding? The answer, I believe, is, go ahead.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. I'm sorry. Before we move on to any other questions, I and thank you all for opening this up. This is a real example of community action together. So the different communities, I've heard 3 and then I've heard 4. So we're talking about Winooski, Williston, South Burlington, and also Burlington. Is that correct, Nick?
That is correct.
Okay, so right now there are 4 communities, and in the pilot, Winooski is getting 2 of those 10. Correct?
Approximately, yes. We haven't identified the final numbers, but it most likely will be around 2 houses.
So when the 50 houses across those 4 communities come up, how many Winooski houses might we just guess? What could you estimate we could get in that would actually be Winooski houses?
So we're hoping to. So it's a complicated answer. In the eyes of the FAA, they pushed us to only incorporate houses that were closest to the airport or had the highest decibel levels, those closest to the 75 DNL. There are no houses in Winooski at that range. So what we instituted within the implementation plan is a diverse way of accomplishing this by associating a percentage of each one of those annual appropriated funds, as well as the quantity of houses amongst the communities. I don't know offhand, but especially when we go into the 50 houses per year, but it should be a proportion to how many houses are total within the community. As the mayor pointed out, there are quite a few houses within the Winooski community. In fact, about half of the total number within the entire noise exposure map inside the 65 DNL. So that should be an indication of how we appropriate, or how the FAA, rather, I should say, appropriates some of these funds and quantities amongst the communities. I can't say for sure because it's going to be really dependent on the FAA's determination.
Thank you. I just want to point out that even if it's 20 of the 50, which it probably won't be, but let's say Winooski is really, really close to the 75 decibel range, especially after we see what the monitoring is done for noise monitoring. If 20 houses were done in Winooski, it would take 60 years, 60 years, counselors, to be able to insulate the houses impacted, the homes impacted. If there are, as Mayor Lott said, there are 1,300 units. I just want us to go into this with our eyes open and to realize that this 2 houses in the first pilot year, I wish that we could get more. This is one of the reasons why there was such a public outcry against the F-35s being based here in the first place. So thank you. And if you'd like to address any of the other questions that I put on there, the only other ones that I had on there is that, if any of the other communities stop doing their, writing their grants for funding, we're talking about grant money. And Mr. Richards, you said that the DOD says that the DOD doesn't ever give municipalities money from what they tell us. So this is an uphill fight that all of us need to be ready for. I just want to say that as a member, I live right on the Winooski River, and I am right outside of the 65 decibel zone. In fact, I think half of my condo is in the zone and the half I'm in isn't. So there you have it.
I would absolutely agree with you. It's been an uphill battle from the beginning. And meaning we're all working really hard, putting lots of time in and trying to acquire as many funds as we can to do the sound program, and including the sound mitigation and sound monitoring. I mean, we're trying really hard. It is a lot of work, and it is a battle, but it's one that's well worth having.
I just wanted to highlight one more thing about the funding. it is grant funding. If the grants stop being written, the funding goes away. And your other question about will it cost Winooski? So right now the answer is no. We've committed no money to this. We have found external funding for the 10% match. The other 90% is FAA funded. And we have signed a memorandum of understanding with Burlington and South Burlington that commits Burlington to annually apply for this funding and commits the cities of Burlington and South Burlington to chip in money before Winooski ever does. So we should not be on the hook for any.
Mayor, if I can just address one thing, just to make sure it was cleared regarding the noise monitors associated with the funding, if that's all right.
Sure, yeah. I don't want to dig too into those until the next item, but with the funding, sure.
Okay, I can wait till the next item.
Well, let me just, I see there's this other question from Eric Lind that you could maybe speak to about construction styles. Eric, do you want to come over, or I can just read this chat? So will there be a variety of construction styles evaluated, like slate roof versus conventional, square area of window and doors, and high and low square foot areas? Yeah, can you speak to that process of how because you're designing for different homes in different scenarios?
So I would say absolutely. There's going to be a wide array of styles of construction. Jean mentioned a few just as far as historical style goes, but in the overall style of construction, whether it's single family, the different types of roofing styles, the different types of window styles, ceiling heights, multifamily houses into large multi-unit buildings. So it's going to be a wide array of construction styles for sure.
Let me just put a caveat in here is, remember, we're not experts at doing this. This is why we've hired the Jones Paynes group. And I don't, I mean, we're doing the best we can. We've never done this program before. That's why I ask for to have everybody all hands on deck on this so that we get it as right as we can get it. We don't have all the answers. We're going to find those answers as we get into this. I think that, Winooski has a beautiful community that I think it'll benefit if we can be diligent on this and do the best we can. But right now, we don't have all the answers. Joan Paynes has many of those, and they will be managing the project.
Were there other folks who wish to make public comment? Again, you can raise hand or use the chat. I will say this is also why a portion of this resolution is about communications and outreach, because folks are going to have so many questions like this, and we want to make sure that they're addressed in an accessible way.
And if anybody has other questions after this is done, please write us, and we can send them right on to Jones Paynes and get people. We want to have the information out there. And again, if we don't have the answer, we'd like you to have the answer. So we'd like to send it in and get you the information to make sure that you have all your questions are answered.
Thanks, Jean. For the council, so this resolution is on here for discussion only, not for approval. Wanted to see if there is anything you would add or change before bringing this back for approval so we can send it along. So there's been discussion tonight about historic issues, use of local vendors. I had a back channel conversation with staff about insulation ratings, though we didn't come to an agreement that there was a specific rating we should be requesting. So if you have feedback, if there's something else that you would want to see in this before approval, please let me know. I think we can move to item D then, so we can hear the full noise monitoring update and answer those questions for folks. And Nick, do you want to share the timeline and next steps for the noise monitor? And you also wanted to speak to the funding.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. So again, the noise monitors are actually being delivered to the airport right now, and eventually they're going to be installed. The same situation is happening on the online portal where it's being developed, so that members of the public can access that information on a website. Those are expected to be deployed later this summer. We're hoping that by the end of July, these 3 noise monitors, one in Winooski, one in South Burlington at the Chamberlain Elementary School, and one in Williston at the Department of Public Works facility, and then again in Winooski at the town hall, hoping to be live with those by the end of July. The item I wanted to add as far as funding and association with the noise exposure map, and I want to make it very clear that the information and the data collected from these noise monitors actually does not amend or change the noise exposure map. The noise exposure map is the tool that the FAA requires, or the map that the FAA requires to identify those that are eligible for the sound insulation program, or any program really within our noise compatibility program, which there are multiple options. So the data collected or the information collected will be online, will be available to the public, but again, won't be used to amend the noise exposure map. However, the noise exposure map will be changed and or updated in the next few years, again, with additional Federal Aviation Administration funding, and will incorporate and use actual radar data that's collected from the FAA with all aircraft, military and civilian aircraft, and will be incorporated in the next iteration of the noise exposure map. So that's just the one point that I just wanted to clarify. Other than that, the noise monitors are pretty simple. You have on your agenda items some of the examples of what they look like. Tonight we're looking, or we are looking for an easement, which is a requirement of the FAA. Any product that the FAA funds has to be associated, especially if it's off airport property, with an easement. That easement is then, of course, recorded in the land records, and then, of course, well, not of course, but is also identified in another required map called our Exhibit A, which identifies all easements and land owned by the Burlington Airport. Other than that, it's pretty relatively a simple program compared to the rest of things, and we're hoping to be online this summer.
Thanks, Nick. And John, do you want to add anything about the easement process for us?
Yeah, I'll just add kind of a description for folks. So it's a 4x6 pad roughly that's going to be placed on the northern portion of the City Hall lot, kind of in between the parking lot and the railroad. So it's out of the way of operations. It's a standalone unit, solar powered. Regarding the easement language, as Nick said, it's pretty straightforward. We did have our city attorney look at that. He made a couple of minor comments that were incorporated, but other than that, no concerns on our end.
Thanks. Other questions from council about the noise monitoring program or this easement?
Mayor, if I may just add
Sure.
One small piece in there, the picture that you have in the documentation is slightly different than what it's actually going to look like. Like John referenced, it is that pad, but it's almost like a trailer. It does have wheels associated with it. It's not necessarily meant to be moved or to be portable, but that trailer system will be stationed at that particular location. And then on top of that trailer will essentially be that pole system that you see in the picture. So it's not exactly the way that sample is outlined, but essentially a very small location and an ideal location too, because it's just about right under the flight path. So I think it's a great example of some of the noise that associated with the aircraft from the departures and arrivals.
Yeah, so you all talked about installing one here. For that reason, this location is good. Also, as the city, we can easily give the easement And then I also just want to call out publicly that as part of this easement agreement, this is not city equipment. We are not taking care of it, maintaining it, paying for it. We are providing the space so that the airport and the program can do so. I saw some Jim.
Thanks, and it kind of follows on what you were just outlining there, Mayor. One thing I didn't see in here, maybe I just missed it, so I apologize if that's the case. But is there, how do we deal with security of the site and security of the equipment? Any tampering, from that? Is that because it's on city land? Are we responsible for the security of that land? I'm just curious how that's being dealt with, just in terms of this being an open access parking lot that we may not be there all the time observing.
Great question.
South Burlington has asked for a fence around theirs, and we could certainly do the same for yours, but the same with the one that's in Williston. I mean, we hope they don't get vandalized, but we'll do anything we can to help out. No, you're not responsible for it. It's 100% airport related.
Thank you.
Gene, Nick, one thing I will add too is that parking lot, we just installed new video cameras. And so there is a video camera that the police department monitors that oversees that area. And I know there is a light right in the vicinity there. So there will be some eyes on it, if that helps.
That helps.
That's great.
Are there other questions from council? Bryn?
I am curious about the location. Obviously, being on city property is advantageous. I'm curious how the monitoring equipment will differentiate flight noise from train noise and other sounds from the surrounding area, given that we've got a new brewery right next, adjacent to the city property now. They may be having music events related to that. So just curious how the equipment will be sophisticated enough to differentiate sound.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think Eric also relayed that there might be a new construction site right next door shortly as well. So what happens is it is a microphone. It does pick up ambient noises. With this system, like John said, it's completely self-sustainable Wi-Fi or internet, and it will be correlated specifically to radar track data. So as an aircraft departs and noise is picked up, those two events will be logged together and identified together. If you've ever played around with some of the radar applications on a cell phone, like Flight Radar or Flight Radar 24 or Flight Aware, it's almost a similar situation where you're almost going to see an aircraft of some sort. It'll have some delay to it, just like those programs do. And then you'll see that aircraft associated with each particular noise monitor as it departs or arrives.
And with the flight data, obviously that'll be tracking the directionality of the flight as well.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Are there other questions from council? We can open it up to public comment. Dr. Eklund, I know you put some questions in the chat. Not sure if those were answered or not.
Thank you. Many of my questions were about how the data would be used and assessed. And from what Mr. Longo just said, it looks like it's not going to be used to revise the noise maps. However, when the noise maps are revised, are they still going to be using the average 24-hour noise rather than the amount of decibels in a single pass by 6 different aircraft, let's say.
That is correct. So all of these guidelines are under what's called 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 150, and the only eligible way to receive any of these noise fundings opportunities, including the windows and doors, the noise monitors, etc., is to only use a noise modeling system like our noise exposure map associated with a 24-hour average decibel reading and contour map. So those are the only way the FAA will fund these programs.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to point out to the council, and probably you all are aware of how loud each of these passes really are. They have been clocked at least 110 decibels. So let's say that this noise monitoring system picks this up in the 3 locations that you said. How are we going to? We'll then have accurate data at how dangerous these aircraft and the noise they have actually are to residents of Winooski and the other cities. Do you all foresee that this information is going to be useful to, in what way would this information be used, I guess?
I mean, from the local standpoint, it's
Sure.
it's not data that doesn't impact the FAA funding program, the noise compatibility or the noise exposure map. So I'm not exactly sure what we can or will do with it. I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it and see what the data shows us.
Very similar from an airport perspective as well, Mayor and Dr. Eklund. The data is going to be collected, available to the public, available to view on an online system, but won't be available to be used for future funding opportunities like a new noise exposure map. I'll add a little fine print in there that the radar data that is associated somewhat with this funding source, that information we can use to input into the next version of the noise exposure map, meaning every single aircraft that's going in and out of the airport, that radar information will be incorporated, not only altitude levels, but also exact positioning of that particular aircraft over an entire year will be incorporated into a new version of a new noise exposure map. The decibel levels that are associated with that noise monitor will not.
So just to follow up on that, Mr. Longo, that at one point the DoD said that the actual military aircraft wouldn't be a part of that monitoring. But what you're saying is that radar data that you just talked about, it's going to be able to track when 4 F-35s do a loop around Winooski in order to get into their plan for their landings. Is that correct?
Without diving too much into the technicalities, the way the most military aircraft land and depart from the Burlington airport, they're identified on a radar tracking device with unique transponder codes. When there's multiple aircraft in a flight or a group, so usually what you'll see is 2 or 4 or 6 aircraft within that group. The only aircraft that has a unique identification number is that first aircraft. So that first aircraft will be able to be associated with the noise monitors, exactly as I mentioned before, just like all other aircraft at the airport. The following aircraft within that same flight won't be as easily trackable on the system. But again, they're going to be the only aircraft that are landing or departing at that time, because there's no other aircraft using the airport during that particular operation, if that makes sense. So essentially, the lead aircraft will be identifiable and associated with the noise monitors, and then subsequently, the following aircraft will be picked up on those noise monitors as well, but not as easily tracked on a radar information system. And that's all outside of my realm of knowledge as far as security information and other information associated with the Department of Defense.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other folks with questions or public comment? I see one in the chat. Not something that will be picked up by this program, but an interesting thing to consider. Any other questions?
I just want to say that I've had the same thought that Eric had about the noise in terms of transition to vibration impact on stress and structures. So yeah, kind of anticipating that that's not something that this noise mitigation program will be able to address, but is something that I had questions about as well.
Are there any questions or concerns from council on this easement agreement? Would someone like to move to approve the easement agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Jean and Nick, for coming to give us this update, for placing a monitor here in Winooski. And thank you to Dr. Ackland, Mr. Lynn, members of the public for participating in this discussion.
Thank you again for having us. And again, as the systems get installed, if you need us to come back, we would welcome the opportunity if you'd like us to.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
We'll move on to item E to introduce and welcome Yasmin Gordon, our new equity director. Phoebe, would you like to do the introduction? Wait, did we just lose her? Am I crazy? Do I not see?
No,
Yasmin
I
on screen?
think she might have disappeared.
Oh my gosh. How unfortunate.
She was here.
She was just here.
Maybe just give her 5 to come back. She was on her phone.
Okay, let's take a break. Oh wait, here she is. Maybe. Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess and reconvene at 7:46. Mike? Bryn, if you could go on video when you are back. All right, so it's 7:46. We will reconvene this council meeting with the introduction and welcome of our new equity director, Yasmin Gordon. Welcome. Maybe we want to do a quick intro and then Yas, you can take it away.
Sure. So we're very excited to welcome Yasmin Gordon to the city as our first equity director. And Yas started on May 10th, just last week, and has already hit the ground running and dived right in from the beginning and has already made a lot of great recommendations and had a number of meetings. So the equity director position is primarily going to support the city in making sure that all of our residents' voices are represented in our municipal decision-making processes, among many other things. So we're very happy to have you, Yas.
Thank you so much. Yeah, among other things is definitely true. But I'm super humbled that you all chose me. It was definitely something that I thought, at the beginning was a bit of a long shot, but I'm really excited, really excited to be here. As Phoebe said, I've kind of hit the ground running and I've had the opportunity to connect with and already begin working with quite a few members of the community, which I'm super excited about. So I just, I'm here because I want to make sure that the underrepresented are becoming more and more represented on every level throughout our government and throughout the town of Winooski, so that folks feel like they have a sense of belonging and that they are actually a part of the decision-making process, which is extremely key when it comes to equity work. Many of you might know that I was previously the lead DEI coach, one of the lead DEI coaches for the Champlain Valley School District, and I had worked there for 15 years. So it was definitely a long time to be in one place, but I'm super excited to embark upon this journey for Winooski. And I'm really excited that the town hall is super close to the roundabout where all the good eats are, except for a few that are, a little bit outside of town, but that's fine. I'll just get my steps in going to those places. Winooski has so much to offer, and I really feel like part of my work is going to be not just to amplify the voices of the community, but to amplify the work that's already happening in this town that I feel like the rest of the state is not quite aware of. I have been really, really impressed with all of the initiatives and all of the things that are already happening. And I think that Winooski the town is a real leader in this work, but I'm not quite sure the rest of the state knows that. So that's definitely going to be part of my charge, is to make sure folks know what's going on so that they can look to us to be an example of how they can do this in their own towns. I think that's extremely important as well.
Thank you, Yas. Really happy to have you. And I have already had the chance to work with you a little bit and very impressed. So I'll just open it up to counselors if there are any questions for Yas. But you did actually a really good, robust introduction. Bryn, go ahead.
Hi, welcome. I first wanted to ask, what do you prefer to be called, Yas or Yasmin? What would you like us to call you?
Thank you. That's actually really nice of you. Everybody calls me Yas. My students used to call me Miss Yas, but I don't expect that of any adult in this situation. So yes, thanks. Yas is just fine.
Great. Okay. Well, welcome. We've been looking forward to you having you join us for many weeks and are very excited about all this project work ahead of us. So please let us know what you need from us as well. And as far as, touching on your last statement, I'd love to help in any way that I can to amplify the work that we are doing and partnering with other municipalities to share what we've been doing, what has worked for us, but to take lessons learned from other areas as well. I know that the Lieutenant Governor does a recurring seat at the table panel on Mondays, maybe once or twice a month. Maybe we could take advantage of that opportunity and have you present or speak to your project work there in the coming months to share with the statewide efforts. So just an idea, but I'd love to do what we can to highlight your project work with us.
Thanks. I think that's a great idea. Is it Bryn? Bryn, you
Yes.
go by Bryn. Okay, thanks. And also, I just wanted to let you know, kind of, adding on to that, just to let folks know that I have myself and Phoebe are now on the Vermont League of Cities and Towns Equity Committee. And so that is the whole focus of that group, is to help create kind of a toolkit for other municipalities around the state who are embarking on this work. So that is definitely, I think, an avenue that would be available to start talking about the deep dive that Winooski has done over the last couple of years.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Welcome to Winooski. Yes.
Thanks so much.
Welcome.
Yeah, no questions. I want to say welcome. So excited to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for many, many months. Thank you for joining.
Of course.
Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment, ask a question? Again, use the raise hand feature or chat. All right. Well, it is great to have you here, and thank you for taking the time to introduce yourself to us, and looking forward to continuing to work together.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to meet all of you folks in person one day.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
All right. Yeah. So we will move then to item F. This is on for discussion. This is Champlain Housing Trust Development Agreement, which Heather will introduce.
Yeah, so this is the first of 3 agenda items that are on your agenda just for discussion tonight. So I've brought you forward draft agreements, a variety of draft agreements with Champlain Housing Trust, all pertaining to the proposed development of 20 affordable homeownership opportunities at 32 Mallets Bay Ave. So that's the O'Brien Community Center site. And we have been working closely with Champlain Housing Trust for a while now to get this project off the ground. And suddenly it is very much rocketing off the ground as their financing package has come together. I do have Rob Lukes from Champlain Housing Trust here with me also to answer any questions as they may come up. And Rob has been with us previously for some of these meetings, but I'm going to try to take you pretty expeditiously through these 3 agenda items. We have them separated so you can speak to any specific issues you have with any of these agreements. So as you know, at your February 16th meeting, you had a deeper dive where you got a full update on the project design, development plans, and that's where you authorized staff to negotiate agreements with CHT and to co-sign on the subdivision application and any related permit applications that were necessary. So what I'm bringing for you tonight is, first, we'll start with the development agreement. This is just the proposed overarching agreement between Champlain Housing Trust and the city, really memorializing what our mutual intents are here and laying out our roles and obligations. And this has been a remarkably easy partnership thus far, and I really feel that I should knock on wood having just said that. So there was relatively little disagreement about any of this development agreement. So this is substantially unchanged from the initial document that was proposed. This is currently a draft, but if there are any issues that you see in the development agreement, I would love a heads up on that. And Rob and I are ready to go forward working out any of those details. Christine, would you rather that I go through all of them right now? I gave you a single memo that has all of the documents, or do you want to just keep it one at a time?
You could just give an overview of all 3.
Okay. The next agreement that you have before you is a shared use parking agreement. This is the one that took the most negotiation. This is for use of spaces at the O'Brien Community Center parking lot that belong to the city. And I have to say that CHT has been fantastic about trying to accommodate as much of the parking necessary to meet their zoning needs on the subdivided parcel that will be their parcel ultimately when we transfer that property. So they have accommodated 30 of the 34 spaces required by zoning for that property right on the property. So what we are looking at here is a shared use agreement for 24/7 access to 4 spaces on the O'Brien Community Center parking lot. And then based on calculations that were done by Champlain Housing Trust, they think there may be a need for an additional 5 spaces. So we have put into the agreement that those 5 spaces would be from 5 p.m. until 8 a.m. only. And this is not dedicated spaces. This is just access to spaces shared with the O'Brien Community Center. And I think we're all trying to be very sensitive to the fact that we do have existing tenants at the OCC, and we do have a potential move of City Hall to that site. I would say probably much further down the road. So that is not something that is decided, but we are trying to accommodate space for that as well. And then the last agreement is a preliminary purchase and sale agreement. Again, this is a draft, and there are a couple items that we'll bring back to you when we bring you the complete draft, the complete package of documents, which I assume will be on June 7th. We have also to identify the location and dimensions of the easements that are referenced in the purchase and sale agreement. So we just really want to make sure that we have those firmly defined and on site plans, so that we're all talking about the same thing when we're talking about these easements, and there's clarity to what those easements are for. And second, we'll bring back a municipal resolution that's in a recordable form authorizing the transfer of title to Lot 2 to Champlain Housing Trust as the buyer, and appointing an individual to execute all the transfer documents on our behalf. And then lastly, I'm sorry, there's one more thing that I wrote about in the memo. That is the subdivision plat. That is not something that you need to take action on at this point in time. That is something that goes through the Development Review Board, but staff has co-signed on the subdivision application, and it's been submitted to the Development Review Board for final approval, where it will be considered at their meeting this Thursday evening. So that's the quick overview.
Thanks, Heather. Nice to see this moving forward and to hear that negotiations have been easy, standard language agreement. The one question I had is that on page 2 in the development agreement under purchase and sale, it references a non-exclusive easement for not less than 12 parking spaces. However, the other agreements refer to 9 spaces.
I apologize for that. That was a previous agreement, and we have since did that. So my apologies. I must have sent you an earlier version of it, but we have come to agreement on that.
That is great. Typo. Are there questions from council on these agreements? Jim.
This is exciting to see come together. Thank you for the quick overview on the documents. Could you remind me what the current number of parking spots are and what the remaining parking spots will be in the city lot after development? So we're losing, is it just the back row of parking, or is it back row? Is it the 2 back rows of parking?
I believe it's the two back rows of parking, and for a period of time, we'll be losing part of that just for staging of the construction, but those will be coming back online after construction, will be restriped and will be added back into the mix. So in those 2 middle tiers, I believe there's something, and pardon me if I don't have it exactly right, I believe it's 36 spaces are available in that middle area, and then we'll get more back online in the staging area once construction is complete. Also, CHT did submit to us a proposed plan for how we could restripe the entire property and add more parking on the north side of the site. And then in addition to that, there are 17 spaces that are diagonal along the railroad easement that are not included in the plan. So you wouldn't see those, but there are an additional 17 spaces over there.
Great, thanks. That's helpful. And the only other question I had, it references a construction schedule in the development agreement and meeting that construction schedule. Is that, I didn't see the attachment D. I assume that's something that's still going to be figured out and then presented as part of the final package.
That's right.
Other questions? Bryn.
Yeah, thanks. I also had similar questions about the attachments. Kind of puts the whole thing in context sometimes, so I was looking for those. And I guess that will those be available in the near future, or is it just going to be with the packet right before council, the next council meeting?
We were planning on bringing them back with a completed package. Some of those attachments are things like the definition of the easements on plans, and those don't currently exist. So they're under development. John Rauscher is working with the civil engineers on, putting in place what we can do on the city side for that. So you'll see those completed plans. Clearly, I can put on the June 7th meeting. It can be a discussion approval item if you prefer, so that it's not strictly for approval. If there are more questions, then we could take it and come back again with it if necessary. Of course, that's all with the understanding that CHT intends to be under construction starting in July. So we're just trying to move it as quickly as we possibly can and develop those additional documents to bring back to you next time.
Okay. I'm also curious, has there been any outreach to the OCC tenants currently, or, just wondering what they're aware of, how much contact we've had with them?
Yeah, so we held a meeting specifically for the O'Brien Community Center tenants, and we did have CHT there. I was there, Ray was there, John was there, had communication with them. Certainly, we've had a discussion with Chris Snyder of Snyder Homes, who is doing the construction work, about the possibility of holding monthly meetings with the O'Brien Community Center tenants to ensure that they're aware of what's going on and what to expect in the coming month. So Chris is absolutely on board with doing that, and I have informed the OCC tenants that we will be setting those up. That's something that I hope to set up for, I think June 15th is what Chris Snyder was hoping to have set up. So that's something that's on my radar to set up with them.
Okay, great. What's the estimated timeline for construction? Like 6 months, 9 months, 12 months?
12 months.
12 months. Yeah, so curious just about the parking agreement. Is this, it sounds like the 5 spaces are into perpetuity from my understanding of the agreement.
Yeah, the 5 for overnight hours only, yes.
Yep. And then just regarding, it mentions like some use and care. I'm just wondering about plowing. That's completely on the city to manage.
Yeah, so part of what we are working on currently is coming up with math of what it will cost to maintain and do plowing, all of the operations for that, so that we can then put that into the parking agreement as, just a straight line cost for the cities, so that we're not paying the costs of maintaining spaces that are being used by CHD, but instead are being compensated for that cost.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Any more questions from council? Any questions from members of the public? See something in the chat. Oh, is there any impact on the community garden? I don't believe so. That should stay the same.
No, there's no impact on that. Should we decide to go forward with City Hall on the site? And again, that's a big discussion and is not something that we have been given direction to move forward on at all at this point. But in the future, if we were to go forward with that, we might have to reevaluate the site to ensure that we have enough parking for that use as well.
Yeah, for longer background context, there were conversations several years ago about relocating City Hall to the O'Brien Center property, but there has been no forward motion on that the entire time that I've been here. And it's currently not under discussion at this time. There's also a question about safety fencing at the railroad. I don't believe that is in the plans at this point.
No, oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, we did during the project committee, we spent a lot of time looking at how the construction fencing would be staged for the building project and pedestrian rerouting, but nothing, we didn't touch any of the railroad, that area at all. But it's something we can look into.
Is there any additional feedback that would be helpful, Heather or Rob, as you move forward here?
I want to reiterate what Heather said. This has been a very, very smooth process, and the city's been just a tremendous partner, and very appreciative.
It's great. Thank you. Since these are all discussion items, I think it is acceptable to move forward, as we took items F, G, and H sort of right in a row there. So thank you for joining us, Rob.
My pleasure. I look forward to seeing you hopefully in a few weeks.
Yeah, excellent.
Good night.
And thank you. Thank you, Heather. We will move to item I. This is the final report on historic preservation, which Heather, you will also introduce.
Yep, absolutely. So to give you the very quick overview, this initiative is really the result of conversations that we were having back in 2019, I believe, with the community having concerns about ensuring that we are preserving our historic resources. And so we went forward and got a municipal planning grant through Agency of Commerce and Community Development to hire a consultant to come in and really do an evaluation, particularly along the form-based code gateway districts, which are Mallets Bay Ave, Main Street, and East Allen Street, which is where majority of development is happening in the city now. And really the concern was that we were going to lose important buildings without ever having done an inventory of what was there in the first place. So this is a charge that we put to VHB, and Britta Ton, who was the lead on that, is here with us. And we asked them to do three things. One, do a historic resource inventory of the gateways. Two, facilitate a community conversation about our priorities for historic preservation. And then three, come back with recommendations for potential policy or bylaws that would support historic preservation in the community. And this is really us coming back with a high-level overview of what some of those recommendations are. So I will turn it over to you, Britta.
Thank you, Heather. And I just want to say that I'm really excited to have worked on this project. I'm a Winooski resident, as many of you know, so I have, I'm really invested in this community. And so it's really great to be able to take this deep dive into Winooski's history and built environment and really come up with a plan for some sort of preservation in the future. And I'll just give a really quick overview. Some of you have heard this information of the 3 steps that I took as part of this project. So in the summer of 2020, I did a reconnaissance level survey of all 228 properties in the gateway districts. And the purpose was to identify properties that might have some historic or architectural significance, and then warranted some extra analysis and documentation to figure that out. In the fall, I looked at 111 of these buildings and I documented them pretty thoroughly and analyzed their history and architecture and came up with buildings that had some sort of significance architecturally or historically. Really 92% of the buildings I looked at could warrant, some sort of significance, with 21 of them, or 18%, having a really high level of historic or architectural significance. And I'm hoping that all this work that I did and the documentation and the mapping I did at some point can become available to the public, because it's a really great addition to Winooski's historic record and might be of interest to people, especially if you own a property in one of these districts. I'm sure I've done quite a lot of analysis and documentation of it. So following these surveys, I engaged in public outreach efforts over the winter, and that included presentations about my research to City Council, the Planning Commission, the Housing Commission, with the purpose of really introducing what I was doing and the next steps forward to creating a historic preservation bylaw, and to gather feedback from members of the public that were in attendance and from commissioners and councilors. I also did some targeted outreach, in particular to owners of the 21 properties that I mentioned had a high level of architectural historic significance, to just kind of gauge what take their temperature as far as how they feel about a preservation bylaw, what questions they might have had. Most of the responses I got just in general from all the outreach was pretty positive. It sounded like there was a lot of interest in this project. And I will say that I had a couple property owners respond to my outreach expressing concern that a preservation bylaw would impede their ability to improve their properties, which is a very common point of view about preservation, and I will address that in a little bit. So the third phase of the project was to recommend a preservation bylaw for the city that would offer protections for the significant historic buildings. So I will say that Winooski has already articulated its commitment to preserving its heritage. Both the master plan and the unified land use and development regulations do address the idea of historic preservation and protecting Winooski's significant buildings and preserving its heritage. So, this is building off of that. And I think the recommendations I've made are consistent with the spirit of historic preservation as articulated in the plan and the land use regulations. And really what I ended up doing, though, is I kind of created a sort of four concepts for a preservation bylaw or related to a preservation bylaw. And the purpose of that is to kind of separate out different pathways that the city can kind of take or explore with regards to historic preservation, some of which would be maybe an easier approach to sort of planning for preservation, others maybe further down the road that the city might be interested in exploring. And I hope that it's helpful in that sense to kind of see different options or see how they all might relate to each other, and whether you choose to adopt any of these ideas into a bylaw. This gives the opportunity to do it as a phased approach. So my number one recommendation, and I highly encourage this, is for the city to establish a historic preservation commission in order to become what's called a certified local government. Also called a CLG. The CLG program, it's a national program that's administered by the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation. And its goal is to really encourage communities to engage in preservation planning. And the great thing about it is that there is grant funding yearly available to CLGs to do all sorts of different types of projects like historic resources surveys, kind of like what I did earlier in 2020. Creating design review guidelines and other resources for property owners, completing oral histories and heritage research projects, and educational programming around heritage or preservation. So the most important requirement to have this CLG status is to establish a historic preservation commission. And it needs to meet a few times a year and be staffed by people who have some, relation to the field of historic preservation, whether it be historians, architects, people experienced in public history, archaeologists, and other interested community members. And what I included, I think, in the report and a memorandum that you received is draft language for this. And that language comes straight from the Division for Historic Preservation as their recommendations for what an ordinance would look like just to establish this Historic Preservation Commission. And there are, I believe, maybe, I don't know if I have this right, but around 16 CLGs throughout the state. Most of them have an ordinance that looks very similar to the one that I proposed, and because they use the state template. And so that is one of my recommendations. A second one would be the creation of a local landmark and historic district register. I'll just call it a local register, and to establish a process by which properties or historic districts would be listed in this register. If Winooski chooses to pursue this concept, this is like cutting edge preservation, and Winooski would be the first community in the state to actually have this sort of landmark register. And the reason for doing this related to having a preservation bylaw of some sort is that, you know, a lot of communities end up using state and national register listing status to enforce local ordinances and zoning. And that's really not best practice, because, you know, state and national register listing and designation is intended to mostly be honorific, and it doesn't come with burdens, you know, to be placed on property owners. So suddenly, if those listings are used to enforce local zoning ordinance, you're really kind of you know, going against the spirit of what these designations are all about. It's not meant to put restrictions on property owners of any sort. So, you know, the Division for Historic Preservation really highly encourages municipalities to explore the use of local designation to relate to some sort of local ordinance. So I won't get into all the details of you know, the process for how a building might become landmarked, or you know, what requirements there are. I would imagine if there was a Historic Preservation Commission established, that they would be involved in this process. So the next two bylaw concepts that I developed would really pertain to properties that could be listed in this local register, and either individually or part of a historic district. So I really recommend that Winooski create a demolition review process that would have a little bit more teeth and require applicants to really carefully weigh alternatives to demolition and prove that demolition would be the only prudent and feasible alternative for redeveloping a property. This doesn't mean that, you know, if you have a significant building that you can't ultimately you know, pursue that route, as long as you can really demonstrate that there is no way to use the historic building in a redevelopment proposal for a property. This is a pretty common type of bylaw that communities have, and typically it's structured in the way that there's an application that requires supporting documentation, like maybe studies from architects or engineers showing that a historic building can't be rehabilitated and effectively used for new development, that you know, possibly you know, a business analyst or someone who can show that the economics just don't work. One of the challenges that we have in the form-based code district is that the regulations say that buildings, I don't know the exact numbers, have to be, you know, pretty close to the edge of the street or the sidewalk. Most of the historic buildings are set back a little further, so that creates challenges for how to incorporate a historic building into new development in these districts. So it's possible that maybe there could be variances for that to encourage the reuse of historic buildings, possibly some other types of incentives. So that's another idea I came up with. You know, some considerations would be, how do you define demolition? Does it mean taking an entire building down or a certain percentage of a building? Would there be penalty for demolishing a building prior to the application being approved? You know, I brought up the idea of incentives. And then the idea of demolition by neglect. It's a problem often that people will intentionally let their building deteriorate to the point that it can't be salvaged or rehabilitated. So how would you address that? And the last concept I developed is developing a set of design guidelines that are catered very specifically to Winooski with respect to the types of historic buildings that exist here and the financial realities. So design guidelines are used by a lot of municipalities, and I know that that does appear in our existing land use regulations, not a lot of detail, but you know, they're used to really encourage property owners to explore ways that they can you know, make sensitive changes to their properties, or just learn, like, what are the options out there for rehabilitating a historic property. And having some sort of publication or guidebook for property owners could be really useful. If you want to check out some examples, Bennington and Shelburne have really great publications that offer guidance. And the idea with the guidelines is that, you know, these are ultimately, they're not like, they don't dictate whether or not you can get a permit. So in some places like New York City, for example, there's a very strong landmarks law. And unless you follow strict historic preservation standards, you won't get a permit for your building project. So the idea here is that the guidelines would, you know, be looked at by the Historic Preservation Commission and a project evaluated against them, and then a recommendation would be made to the actual permitting entity, granting the permit as to, you know, whether or not the project, you know, meets the design guidelines, or if there should be some changes or suggestions for the property owner. The development of the actual guidelines was beyond the scope of this project, but a lot of communities use CLG funding to create publication and to create design guidelines. You know, I would say that when you think about design guidelines, it's important when reviewing them to make sure, you know, and this can be part of it, is that the most important architectural features of a building that really distinguish it and kind of define its historic character, maybe preserve those, but allow for flexibility with other materials and features of the building. So some additional recommendations, you know, beyond just the creation of bylaws and getting in the weeds with that, you know, coming out of this project, you know, I realize there's so many opportunities for Winooski to engage in historic preservation efforts. If Winooski were to become a CLG, there could be so many great studies of Winooski's history and built environment, particularly in the form of surveys, research, oral history projects. One thing I've been thinking about a lot, and I discussed this a little with Heather, is how the field of historic preservation needs to be more inclusive and equitable. And that means identifying, documenting, and protecting historic places and events and people that really reflect the full story of a community. And I know this is in alignment with Winooski's values, community values, and with some of the feedback that I heard at some of the meetings. And, you know, in light of this, I would encourage the city, and we're seeing this more and more in, you know, historic preservation plans and communities, that you make an intentional effort to seek out BIPOC, LGBTQ and women's histories, and ensure that city-promoted historic preservation efforts really work to incorporate these histories into the historic and cultural narratives surrounding the city. So, you know, I think you received a copy of my report. There's a lot in there. It's very long. So good job if you've read it or at least looked at some sections. But the recommendations section does have some more details about, you know, where can Winooski go beyond just this process of preservation bylaw creation. So that's all I've got, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, Britta. So for council's context, this item is on for discussion tonight. I think this is a chance to ask Britta questions about these recommendations. We're not like deciding yes or no how we want to move forward here. Heather?
Yeah, I just want to suggest that I think that this is the next steps on this would be to have a discussion about it at the priorities and strategies meeting. And that can push forward, you know, what we decide to bring forward and how we utilize all of the recommendations that we've been given.
Thank you, Heather. So I do want to ask, you know, when I think about our land use and zoning approach in our gateway districts, you know, one of the goals of having form-based code is to administratively create, like, what are the guidelines of what we're trying to build, so that we don't have to set up a commission. We don't have to go through an individual process for every project that goes through. And I wonder if you considered, or if there even are existing approaches that kind of would bake in some historic preservation into regulations like that, in that kind of, you can apply this each time way?
Yeah, that's a good question. Burlington has some overlap there. Typically, the historic preservation ordinance sort of takes the lead when you're dealing with a designated building. However this gets crafted, and this is obviously discussions to have with Eric, is, there can be some sort of design overlay district that does cover the entire city and has, and really covers, though, at the same time, just those significant buildings that would be local register listed or eligible. And then even if they are in the form-based code district, just those buildings would be subject to this extra layer of review. So it wouldn't be like every property that is up for redevelopment. And there are not honestly that many. So it wouldn't, have a huge effect across the board on how, development is administered in the form-based code districts. That's my thought. I mean, there might be other ways to structure that, and that would be probably more further conversations with Eric or the Planning Commission about, is there a better way to integrate this together? But, my thought is that if we could have this overlay district that sort of even encompasses the form-based code, we could just look at, very specific properties that have this extra level of significance because they're on the local register. That makes sense.
Yeah, and is a Historic Preservation Commission a requirement to become certified local government?
It is, yes. And what is not a requirement is to have a preservation bylaw. So, the certified local government, really, the intention is to get a community really thinking about preservation planning and to engage in historic preservation efforts that do not have to be, regulatory in nature by any means. So this commission, and it can meet 3-4 times a year to do other things that are not just looking at, bylaw. So it's there's a lot of options for the work that the commission can do.
Thank you, Britta. Bryn?
Hi, thanks. I was thinking that, with the Centennial Commission looking at project work, I think they have a meeting this week. It's coming up. And that they're looking at additional ideas, that it could be an opportunity that Heather or another city staff person that's assigned to that group could bring up as an opportunity to share some of this research with them and some events for that celebration. I'm curious about how historic preservation kind of works maybe in some ways against energy efficiency. I know that there's some properties in Colchester, Essex, that have some historic preservation elements, and it does make it challenging to do weatherization work. And as we're looking at just earlier this evening, talk about the noise mitigation insulation work. Curious how many of these properties that you researched are within the 65 DNL exposure zone?
Yeah, and that's a good question regarding the noise mitigation. Without having really, delved into exactly what this process would look like, I think if you're familiar with the LED program, the Burlington LED program, I think it would be a pretty similar approach. Is that actually, because there is federal funding for the project, it would kick in this level of review that is always has to happen when you're working with a National Register listed building or eligible building. It's really one of the only times that there could be, some regulatory component to the National Register listing, is just to make sure that there are no adverse impacts on the historic character of a building. So Like the Burlington Lead program, if we're dealing with windows, it would be selecting a historically appropriate replacement window. For example, like Jean talked about that quite a bit, about the different options for that. Insulation too, there are methods of insulating that are sensitive to historic buildings and the way they're constructed. So that would be that would come into play with the noise mitigation. Regarding energy efficiency, there actually are a lot of studies done about how, historic preservation and energy efficiency really are compatible. I mean, the one thing that preservationists love to put out there always is that, the greenest building is one that already exists and the greenest materials are the ones that are already there. So, in that sense, very compatible. But, when it comes, there are, windows come up a lot as a point of almost contention, I want to say, between people considering energy efficiency versus preservation. There are ways to weatherize windows and to preserve historic windows while creating energy efficiency. So, I think design guidelines and the creation of those, and there are models that others municipalities are using, and offering assistance to property owners on how to go about maybe doing weatherization or energy efficiency updates that are sensitive to historic buildings. That could be a great resource to property owners. And there's lots of studies out there, and I can forward you. I think I put one in the additional resources in the report at the very end of the list. About what Connecticut has been doing to kind of encourage retrofits, energy efficiency retrofits in historic buildings.
All right, I leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you. Thanks, Britta, for this really detailed report. One of the things you mentioned kind of at your outset was that you'd like to see some way to make this work accessible to the public. And I think the report is one way to do that. But I'm curious what you have in mind, if there's some other way to deliver or preserve this information so that it is discoverable and easy to access into the future. Do you have any recommendations or things you would suggest along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think one way to do that, and I know that because my company is doing this with other projects, is really utilizing ArcGIS. Has some really cool mapping systems, like a web map where you can, click on a property and information about the property pops up, which could be the inventory form that was created, some baseline information about date of construction, whether it's listed on a state or national register. So that's a great way because it's a nice visual way for people to access information. This requires extra work, but, the creation of, say, story maps, if you're familiar of that, which is similar, an interactive map that provides information presented in a really easy to read way. Eventually, the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation will have this survey on their website. They have an online database of all the studies that are done regarding historic preservation in the state. It's called the Online Resource Center. It's not as user friendly to the general public, but yeah, I really think mapping is the way to go. And I'm not sure the extent to which the city has really implemented a GIS system. I know CCRPC has done some GIS mapping for its municipalities, but that would be a great way to make this information accessible.
Thanks for, I'm just going to assume that you're going to say yes, Mayor, to letting me talk some more. Thank you. That is, I think, ArcGIS Online and some of the open data hubs are probably potentially good ways to host that information. Another unrelated question, do you have a sense of what level of staff commitment and support you need to make a preservation commission successful? How much city resources will we be, not in terms of dollars, but just like is it an hour a month? Is it a day a month? Like, what are we looking at in terms of commitment of time to make the Preservation Commission succeed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it depends on how often the commission would meet. In the beginning, if it's just establishment of the Preservation Commission to sort of set some preservation goals, to explore funding projects through the certified local government program, the commission would not need to meet very often. I wouldn't think so. So, maybe there's an hour a month of staff support, but it might not even be that the commission meets monthly. So, I think St. Albans just recently became a certified local government and recently established a historic preservation commission. And I think they're meeting quarterly. So, whatever amount of staff support, I don't know. I imagine probably the planning and zoning director would be a staff liaison, and the meetings would probably start out pretty light, I would imagine. But so I don't know if that totally answers your question, but.
Well, I think this is something that we could ask for if we discuss this at the priority and strategy session, like Heather, Eric. What do you think the lift is to support this proposed plan? Both in getting it, launching it, and then like continuing to support not just a commission, but this review process. In a similar vein, I don't know if Britta, you'd be able to answer this, or Eric could also have insight maybe, but this application for demolition, I would be curious what it would cost somebody to get some of these reports put together, thinking about an individual homeowner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think if we're talking within the context of demolishing a historic building for a larger development, a lot of these reports might not be too difficult to come by or almost exist, and would just need some tweaks to really talk more about the historic building. I've worked on some projects in Burlington where I've worked with architects, and they could, throw together a memo that, assuming an architect might be involved in a larger development project, they can put together a memo pretty easily, and that there would be some sort of financial planner working with a developer who could put together memos pretty easily. So, for a larger scale development, for I'm not sure about, a single property owner wanting to tear down their historic building and building like another single family house. I mean, again, I imagine that there would be some, design team involved that could, put together an extra memo for that. So that helps.
Are there other questions from council? We can open it up to public comments. I saw there was a question in the chat, but it's really long. So Paul, do you want to move Eric Lind over? Eric, how do you want to share your question?
Oh, yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions, I guess, as far as, if you're going to proceed with a bylaw, what that would entail for somebody who is a property owner. For instance, in my particular situation, here I am, 75 Main Street, a single family house in the downtown district, which is obviously a non-conforming situation. So if I were to sell or want to change my abode in any way, I suppose I would require a variance. Now, as far as how you craft the bylaw, it would impact how I conduct my business. So I just want to get some assurances from the city council that we're not going to be overly restrictive in the way that that things are playing out, along the gateway in the downtown district. As far as, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I mean, you can have your downtown and have all this, wonderful zoning and stuff. But you can't also have historic buildings that are just, there for eye candy as well, and expect for the homeowner just to, sit here and take it while, mansion's already been, built up by, the developers, So, am I on the wrong end of the stick here or what? I just don't know what to say.
Yeah, so Eric, those are points well taken. And like, we're not making a decision about this. It's something that we're gonna have to talk about for a while if we decide to move forward, host public hearings, because I don't think what we have in this report even tells us how we would address those situations. So, how we would take, in your example, you have this historic building, and if you wanted to redevelop it right now, technically you'd have to follow the form-based code guidelines. So we would have to do some thinking about where the middle ground is for somebody in that situation. And we're not at that stage yet of this decision-making process. So I wouldn't expect to see any action on this for several months.
Right. No, but I just exactly the point is that that there are these exceptions, and I'm not just the only one.
Right. Yeah.
That need to be brought in proactively to discuss, really what's going on here.
Yes, and to that point, the feedback rate, response rate for the individual property owner outreach was abysmal. So I think
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
If we went forward, we should
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But still, you would think somebody who has an interest in their property, if you're making decisions, should show up. But if not, whatever, I will show up.
Well, I would think there could be additional outreach done when this gets, discussed in greater depth and more seriousness.
Yeah, I think if we chose as a council, if we wanted to pursue this, we would need to direct staff to do more targeted outreach to particular homeowners. Are there other members of the public who wanted to make comment, ask questions? Any more questions from council? Staff, anything specific that you would like to hear, or are we good to revisit this at priority and strategy session?
I would just like to thank Britta for her time. It's a really comprehensive report that you've provided, and providing it in such a way that we can take it piecemeal and look at it as a phased option or tweak it is really helpful to us. And I think after that priorities meeting, we'll have a better sense of what direction to take it. So thank you.
Sure. And let me know if you have any questions or need some, during that meeting or some more direction before that. So happy to help out some more.
This is a great resource to help us move forward. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Britta. We will move on to item J, the Housing Trust Fund policy. Heather.
Sorry, muted myself. So the last time that you all saw the Housing Trust Fund policy was in August of 2019. And we got pretty significantly derailed throughout COVID for a couple of reasons. One is our commission wasn't meeting from March through July, but the other is that our partner, Opportunities Credit Union, was also putting out PPP loans and was absolutely buried in those, and actually are still buried in some of those. So apologies for the big delay on that. But when we had the discussion of the Housing Trust Fund policy in August, council made recommendations for some changes, and all of those have been included in this revised draft policy. And that's pretty much all the changes that have happened here, with one exception. The final change was a recommendation from Opportunities Credit Union staff. And I've laid out for you in my memo exactly where all of those changes to the document are. I'm happy to walk you through them or happy to take questions on them, whichever you would prefer.
I think we all had time with this in our packet and have seen this in the past. Bryn, this might be your first time seeing it.
It's not Bryn's first time seeing it. Bryn was very actively engaged in reviewing this just as a resident previously.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Then let's make this space for questions for Heather on this policy update. Bryn.
Jim, you're on this commission, is that right? Yeah. Is there anything any updates beyond what Heather's provided that you've thought about and as far as your work on this commission?
No, the commission is very excited to see this moving ahead. It's something that they had finished, and there was that one minor change from Opportunities that was discussed around the assets, and that's been recommended back. And I think they're just really excited to see this thing actually move forward. I'm excited that Opportunities is still involved. So I think that both of those pieces that we've kind of been able to come back to this after 2 years is really good. So I don't think that there's any other points to raise from the commission's work at this point.
And then Heather, obviously Yaz has only been on the team a week. Has she had a chance to review this at all?
She has not, but she is on my radar to review this prior to bringing back a final for approval. Yes, and certainly there have been a lot of discussions around implicit bias and around equity and accessing this. One piece that I will say about the Housing Trust Fund that has not been resolved at this point is issues with people who are prohibited by religion, by Islam, from incurring interest. So that is an inequity that continues to persist in this. We do have some examples of ways that communities have overcome that, but we have not implemented anything in this. It's been a difficult conversation that we've had for quite some time. So I would flag that as one issue that remains unequitable in this process for certain.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from council? Any questions from the public? All right, I will take the relative quiet as affirmation that these changes are acceptable. So we can move on to item K, the Opportunities Credit Union MOU.
Yeah, and this is the last of my batch for tonight. This again is on for discussion, and as I had mentioned, it's been a long process of back and forth, and Opportunities is currently working on putting together a fee structure that can be included in this document. They have provided initial fees, but we want them right in the MOU so that we're clear about what those payments will be. And this is a pot of money that has been sitting with Opportunities Credit Union for, at least a decade, I think maybe more than that, as the home improvement program. So we are shifting from one program to an entirely different set of kind of three programs under one umbrella. So it does require some significant alterations to what the roles and responsibilities are on each side, as well as what the fee structure is. And so they have not yet developed for us what the down payment assistance fee structure would be, but that should be coming to us, I think, in the next week so that we can review that and then bring it back to you for formal approval.
Thanks, Heather. Other questions from council on this agreement?
Can I just add that I have had Angela review this as well, just because she has had experience with the home improvement program in the past, so that we could add to it anything that we required that would make administering this a little bit easier. So there have been additions made. And Angela was the one who requested that we have the fees directly in this document. So we will have those.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the public? All right, so look forward to seeing the updated version in the future, legal review and all that in place.
You will be seeing this full slate again at the June 7th meeting, so be prepared for that.
Thank you, Heather. So we will move to item I, financial policies and accounting systems update from Angela.
Very exciting updates here. So we currently have a financial policy manual that was adopted between 2011 and 2017 with some minor updates in between. It's very outdated and references positions that the city no longer has. And we have put in place some new technologies that are not covered. None of our policies currently cover credit cards or some of the other new systems that have been put into place. So this is an effort to rewrite, to incorporate the city as it exists today, including my position, the staff accountant, and the clerk's office as it currently exists, as well as all the technology that we've changed with. These drafts integrate all of the previously approved policy information, as well as VLCT model policies and the Government Finance Officers Association best practices. All of them have been reviewed and commented on by the Finance Commission and ultimately approved by the Commission to bring forward to the Council for final approval. There's lots of pieces here. These 5 policies represent the general accounting system for the city, including budgeting, revenues, purchasing, the reserves, and just the general accounting system and financial reporting. Happy to answer any questions you have about them.
Thanks, Angela. And I'll just add, having sat in on those Finance Commission discussions, changes and suggestions were primarily to add clarity to the language. Nothing really substantial, nothing controversial came up or any like major concerns.
We did incorporate a lot of their feedback regarding how we can get public input on the budget process, how the community would like to receive information about city finances. One of their suggestions was actually the treasurer's report containing visuals.
Which you all saw recently. So questions from council on any of these policies? Bryn?
I just want to say thanks. I know it's kind of dry material, but it's really important and valuable to have. And certainly, you know, getting the packet of updates together can be a long time coming, but once you have it done, it feels really good. So thank you.
Any questions from members of the public?
We are not currently going to accept Bitcoin. There was a question in the comments field.
We'll save that for a future update.
We are not currently equipped to accept cryptocurrency.
All right. Hearing no other concerns from council, last call for council questions. This is on for discussion, but we can bring it back, I think, for approval in our consent agenda next time, seeing as there's been no questions raised. Thank you, Angela. We will move to item M, the community services job descriptions. Ray.
Hey. So just 2 more additional teen employee positions here in the context of the big slate that we brought last week. We had a couple positions that we were anticipating filling that were not defined as yet. So these are 2 more defined positions that we are planning to try to run this summer. So There's no additional fees or costs beyond what was discussed at the last meeting. Again, these are just fleshing out two of the positions that we talked about last meeting.
Thanks, Ray. Questions from council?
Just a quick question. I was a little concerned about just one of the step positions being employed by the snack bar, and is that technically a third party? How's the oversight going to work, I guess?
Yep. So the position would be employed by the city. And when we were in our teen employee program a number of years ago, we had a similar arrangement with Vermont Works for Women, where we had a city employed teen employee who was our employee. We were managing, we had a defined supervisor on the city team. And then they were being co-supervised, if you will, in the work site space by staff from Vermont Works for Women. So it's a pretty similar model to what we did a few years back. So it would be a city position. They would have a defined staff person within our team that would be their direct supervisor, but they would be available to support the work happening in that snack bar at the pool. And I think the other piece that, similar to the way it was at the community center with Vermont Works, we'll always have staff on site to be available as a support for those kids if need be. So it's not like we're sending them to a location that doesn't have, a city staff person in the same building.
Is it a little different with Vermont Works for Women being a nonprofit?
It's a good question. And I might look to Phoebe and or Angela here on the HR side, but it's a good question.
So is the question just how the reporting relationship works if the teen employee is at the pool working in the snack bar?
So that was one question, which Ray seemed to address for the most part. I think there still could be some confusion there. The closest thing I can relate this to is AmeriCorps, and thinking about AmeriCorps being host sites being eligible if they're nonprofit or municipal. I don't recall for-profit being eligible for city employment work. So that's the element that I'm wondering.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question, Brandon. We can definitely dig a little deeper on that. I will be honest, that sort of discrepancy between the for-profit and nonprofit had not come to my mind. So I will definitely look into that a little bit more and see. And I think if it does become problematic, it's not a deal breaker if we need to shelf this position for the year and fill that out in a different way. But I know the folks we're working with through Little City were very excited about being part of it, and we wanted to try to harness that enthusiasm and create another opportunity for kiddos. So, but we'll take a deeper dive on that.
Yeah, maybe one, just the kind of the legal point, and then if there's any financial element that Angela might need to look at as well. But I'll leave that to you, John and Phoebe to decide.
Are there other questions? Any questions from members of the public? Staff, how would you feel about approving these descriptions with this needing to do more research on the financial legal side?
I would feel fine with that. And I think with the agreement, if we find anything troubling there, we'll sort of back off from the snack bar position. I think that's fine.
If council agrees with that, then I would entertain a motion to approve these job descriptions.
Moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I'm
All
going
those
to
opposed? You would like to abstain?
Yep.
All right, motion carries. Item N, this is a chicken permit for 26 Hall Street, which Jim is going to recuse himself from.
So thank you very
much.
Yeah. Yep, I'll present this one quickly. Yeah, so the reason this is on your regular agenda and not on your consent agenda, as with other permits of this nature, is because of who the applicant is. In this case, it is Councilor Duncan who's the applicant. So we wanted to put this on the agenda specifically so that he could recuse himself from the discussion. But there's nothing out of the ordinary about this. It's a permit to keep chickens at the property at 26 Hall Street. There's also a zoning permit included with as part of this, which is currently it's currently in the 15-day appeal period. I don't anticipate any issues with that, but as with all chicken permits, it requires council approval. So I'll just leave it with that, unless there's any questions.
Any questions, concerns? Bryn.
I was just interested why we had one chicken permit in the consent agenda, but not this one.
Right. So the primary reason is because of the applicant. Because it's Councilor Duncan, we most likely would have had to pull this from the consent agenda so he could recuse himself. So.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
Sorry, it's getting late.
Any questions from members of the public? I do see a question from Mr. Eric Lind. We'll have Paul bring you over.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to chime in again. As I've seen a lot of home chicken people pop up throughout the community, and there actually has been a rise in infections regarding Campylobacter and Salmonella in these communities. I don't know if you're aware of that. I would like you to assign the city health officer to evaluate all of the chicken and turkey and other types of animal raising that's going on in non-professional agricultural settings. I do know personally people who have had infections with these organisms, and I only know that because I'm a microbiologist. So I'd just like you guys to consider that before you start approving more and more chicken farms and such around the community.
I'm sorry. Please, to be clear, you're asking us to have our town health officer inspect the poultry? What are you asking for?
Yeah, that's correct. Just so much as there were rats running out of a decayed building, and they needed to be cleaned up. Maybe there should be some local ordinance regarding how people raise and handle the chickens and their products, even if it's for home consumption.
I can have a conversation with staff about this and come back to council at some point with whatever our.
Well, I don't think it's an oddball request. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Like
What I'm saying is that we've never discussed this before and don't
so
have
if
any background in this.
Right.
So.
No. So if someone starts selling eggs out on their front lawn and the community starts buying the eggs and they turn out to be, contaminated in some way, what is your liability? You should consider that, I think.
Thank you. We will have a different conversation about this.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or concerns here? All right, if someone wants to make a motion to approve this permit, now would be the time.
So moved.
Well, second.
Motion by Hal, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Mike, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. So we are on to the item O, the goal update. John, Phoebe, whoever would like to lead that.
So we provided the update number 8 to our 2020-2021 policy priorities and strategies. Sorry, I'm tired too. So all the updates were in red on the document that we attached to the agenda. And just, it should be noted that this will be the last one of these updates that we will provide for this year, because we'll have a new set of goals starting in the new fiscal year in July after our retreat. So, does the council have any questions about these updates?
All looks predictable to me from what we've seen in past updates. Any questions or concerns from the public? All right. This is a discussion item, so we will move on. This brings us to the end of our regular agenda. We do have an executive session warned about the negotiation of real estate purchase and lease related to Lot 7D on Abenaki Way. So pursuant to VSA section 3132, doing this negotiation in public would put the city at a disadvantage. So I'm looking for a motion to find that we need to have this discussion in executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. So I would like to enter into executive session inviting John Rauscher, Phoebe Townsend, Heather Carrington, Bob DePalma, Bill Niquette, Doug Nettie, Liam Murphy, and Ian Davis. Am I missing anyone, staff? Can I have a motion to move to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. So we are going to move to another Zoom line for this executive session. We will return to this after the executive session to this Zoom line, simply to adjourn. We will not discuss anything else during an executive session beyond negotiations related to Lot 7D. So I will see you all over at the other Zoom line.